The song that we just sang, very beautiful song, but it is, I'll have to admit, based on probably an unfortunate translation of a word, I am told. The term there that is translated mansions in the King James is rooms. And the point of that passage that Jesus is making is that there is room. He is going to prepare rooms for every one of the saved individuals in heaven. And in opposition to the doctrines that some religious, quote, Christian people teach, there is plenty of room in heaven for all of the saved to be there. And that is the thing that we should be longing for, looking for, working for, and hoping and praying for every day of our lives. It's not something that we should look forward to when we've lived a nice long life on this earth and enjoyed all the pleasures that we can on this earth, but it's something that we ought to be praying, Lord, come quickly. And I want to talk to you tonight about the work of the gospel in the nation of India. Talking about our trip this past year. This is the Indian national flag, by the way, in case you're wondering what this is all about. And this is my maiden voyage, you might say, on this presentation. Wayne asked me to speak tonight, and I said, "Oh, you're trying to pressure me into getting it done, aren't you?" And he kind of backed up. I said, No, I need a deadline because I need to quit piddling with this presentation, and I need to get it done and strike while the iron is hot. And so I may make many mistakes, and I hope this doesn't run for 3 hours. But it's very, very difficult to get a whole month's worth of experiences down into a presentation that's easy and fast to give. So if you have any suggestions on improving it, I will be most happy to hear them, because I probably do need to revise this a little bit and work on it some. So your indulgence as guinea pigs is appreciated tonight. Why go to India? A man named C.T. Studd, who was a denominational preacher, he founded the World Evangelism Fund, said, "Some want to live within the sound of church or chapel bell. I want to run a rescue shop within a yard of hell." C.T. Studd was known as saying some very controversial things like that shocked the senses of those who called themselves Christians back in the 1800s. But the statement that he makes here is very true. Why would he want to run a rescue shop or a mission, as it were, within a yard of hell? That's where people need to hear the gospel. Why not go to places in America? It was suggested to me one time that why not go to West Virginia? Well, I've got two brothers-in-law from my first wife, who's passed away, who are preaching the gospel in West Virginia. There are churches all over West Virginia. And even though it's one of the poorest parts of the nation of America, the poor of West Virginia live on about the level that the lower middle class lives in India. You do not see people in America sleeping out on the park benches and on the street corners and places like that in America unless they have something a mental disability that causes them to not want to go to shelters. There are shelters available for every person in America to be in if they want to be there. But when you go to India, they don't have that. They do not have the government programs that we have. They do not have the help and the mission, or the quote missionary helps that we have in America. And you see people sleeping on the street all the time because that's where they live. And they don't have a way to go into shelter. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 9, verses 10 through 13, "Then it happened as Jesus was reclining at the table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were dining with Jesus and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, 'Well, why is your teacher eating with the tax collectors and sinners?' But when Jesus heard this, he said, 'It is not those who are healthy who need a physician, but those who are sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire compassion and not sacrifice, for I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners.'" Now Jesus is not saying here that the Pharisees that were questioning him didn't need the gospel as much as these people that recognized that they were in sin. Jesus is saying to the Pharisees that questioned him, you think you're the righteous. And if I preach to you the gospel, you will not hear it. But these people know they're in sin. And they know they have no hope on this earth. And they will hear the gospel. And I think you'll see from the results of this work that we did this past month in India that the people there are hungry for something better than what they have. India is a nation that is oppressed both by the Hindu religion, which is about 93% of its population are Hindu, and so they are in vast control of the culture of that area. And the Hindu religion is an economic religion, and its primary purpose is to suppress the people who are in the lower castes to keep them in a position of servitude. And when someone comes along and tries to help them and better their position, these high caste Hindus, well, what are you doing? They deserve to be down there. They're supposed to stay there. That's where they belong. Don't you help them. And this is what Mother Teresa of the Catholic Church ran into in Calcutta when she came and tried to get people off the street who were dying, who had no help or succor. The high caste Hindus would try to dissuade her from that. Sometimes they would stand and confront her and say, you can't help these people. They're supposed to die like this, like dogs in the gutter. And that's what the Hindu religion does to people. And that's all the hope that they have in this life, is to stay in that caste that they're in. And maybe if they're good enough, they can rise up to the next level. And then eventually rise up to the Brahmin caste where they can then enter into their version of heaven. But it's a long, long trek, and they really don't have any hope. And so the gospel gives them hope that this religion does not. The other thing that holds them down is their socialist government. And the socialist government that wants to give them everything, but really they don't get anything because the government is so corrupt that it all goes to their friends. And you know, the high caste Brahmins who are in control of that government. And it's kind of distressing to me to see America heading down that same path, but I believe that this is God's judgment on America. Let's not get into that. What area did we cover in India? Primarily, we stayed within the state of Hyderabad. Now, I think Dad was in Shantinagar, which should be just a little bit north of Hyderabad. But the only Shantinagar that I could find on the map was down in Bangalore in Karnataka. I don't think he was in Karnataka. I think he was, I'm 99% sure he was up a little bit in Secunderabad, just north of Hyderabad. Shantinagar is actually a neighborhood name within a city. It's kind of like we have the city of St. Petersburg, and then we might have, Kenneth City that exists in St. Petersburg. It's kind of a neighborhood. We have the neighborhood here, which is going to have a subdivision name to it. If you look in the property tax assessor's thing, well, Shantinagar is a name like that. There is a Shantinagar down in Bangalore, but I'm 99% sure that once I hunt hard enough, I'll be able to find out where it is, and it should be in Secunderabad, which is just to the north of Hyderabad. In Andhra Pradesh, the state of Andhra Pradesh, this is a little closer in map, Dad pretty much stayed up in this area because he's in his late 70s and not able to. We tried to go out one time on those Indian roads, and let me tell you, the Indian roads, the best of the Indian roads are about as good as the poorest roads we have here in America. One time they told me that we traveled 35 kilometers to a village, and I said, no, we actually traveled 70. And they looked at me and said, no, it's 35. I said, no, it's 35 this way, but it was another 35 this way in all of the potholes and the ruts that we went through. They laughed and they said, yes, you were probably right. We have to, oftentimes to get to these outlying places, we have to rent one of the big Mahindra SUVs with the big wheels on it, because Dina Dial's little car with these little tiny 11-inch wheels on it simply would not make the trip without being destroyed because the roads are so bad. But at any rate, Dad pretty much stayed. Mahbubnagar is about where Jadcherla is, right down here, and we spent the first week in Jadcherla at the church there, teaching the preachers there, and then Dad went up into Hyderabad, or Secunderabad, which is actually kind of a bedroom community north of Hyderabad, and stayed there most of the rest of the time. And then I went out to Nalgonda after my second week, as a matter of fact. And then we went out from Nalgonda into the Guntur district here, and down to the Prakasham district, Mahbubnagar, and over to the Tandur area, which is over in the Rangareddy district, where Hyderabad is in the Rangareddy district. So you have the state divided up into districts. So this is pretty much the territory that was covered during the time here. And this is, you recognize the guy on the left there, and the guy in the middle is Dad, that's Ruth's father, and then the man on the right is I.S. Dina Dial, and he was one of our principal contacts there, and as it turns out, he is my age, and he and I became very good friends. One of the best translators I think I've ever worked with. I have the utmost confidence in him. His biblical knowledge is unmatched. He has a college degree in business. You know, Indians are not stupid people, by the way. Now, many of them are very uneducated. Many of them can't read and write. But many of them are college educated. Many of them are every bit as intelligent as any American is. And there's no, you know, if I ever started to feel like I was a little bit superior to them, very quickly I would be brought to my senses, because most of the Indians that I came in contact with were just extremely intelligent people. Even the ones that couldn't read or write just had a tremendous amount of common sense. And frankly, I'll say that's something you don't always find in Americans. So, this is the first hotel that we stayed at. They do have some very modern facilities there. When I got to this hotel, this is the Hotel Tourist Traveler in Hyderabad. And of course that's Dad sitting on one of the beds that we stayed in. And when I got to this hotel, getting off the airplane, going in here and looking around at it, the bathroom is off to the left, right over in here. I looked at it and I said, boy, the pictures that they took of this hotel room were a whole lot better than the room actually is. To me, this was sort of like maybe a step below a Days Inn hotel here in America. But at the end of my trip, I came back to this same hotel and spent 2 nights in this hotel, and it looked like the Ritz-Carlton. So it's all a matter of perspective. Some of the places I stayed in while I was in India, just really, this was just, you know, the Taj Mahal compared to them. So you just have to take things the way they are when you get over there. You have to understand that they don't do things the way we do them all the time. For example, they don't use toilet paper in the bathroom. Now, it's not as bad as that sounds. They use their left hand, but they wash themselves. And they have the facilities and the equipment there to do that. So it's really a very clean way. But still, they do not eat with the left hand because that's considered the unclean hand. So if you're ever at an Indian table, you eat with your right hand. And they did always, almost always, have silverware for me. And if silverware was offered, I always took it because it was a lot more comfortable. But if they didn't offer it, I went ahead and ate with my hands, just like they did. Even though in the Hotel Tourist Plaza, one of the first things you run into is this little Hindu shrine built into one of their hallways. And so, you know, you can go into this place of worship and you can worship. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think 6 different Hindu gods there that you can take your pick, and whichever one you feel like worshiping today, you have the opportunity to do that. So everywhere you look, Hinduism is pretty much the prevalent thing there. This is a picture from out of the window of the first restaurant that we ate in Hyderabad. It was a very nice upscale restaurant, had excellent food the whole time I was in India. It was Indian food. It was very spicy, but I didn't find anything that I couldn't eat. And I just told them, whatever you fix, I'll try. I may taste something that I just can't eat, and I'll let you know if it comes up. But I never found anything I couldn't eat. The food is rather spicy. If you have a delicate palate, you may have trouble with it. But I didn't find anything that was too hot for me to handle. So, if you can handle the hot sauce at Taco Bell, you can handle anything that they serve in India. And I'm not talking about the El Scorcher Grande stuff. I'm talking about the mild, medium, hot, and then El Scorcher Grande. I'm talking about the hot. Is about the heat level of the food in India. India has about 3 times the size of or 3 times the population of the United States, crammed into a place about the size of Texas. And so you can understand why the buildings are built so close together in all of the cities, and they're all built so high up, because they've got to cram a big population in there. But now, even doing that, there are areas in India that are very rural areas. They grow a lot of cotton, a lot of peanuts, soybeans. They grow, of course, rice is one of their staple foods. You do see a lot of country in India. And then, but the population centers are just packed as tight as they can get them. This is called the Dasara. Or Desera. Let's see if I can get this to play. This, unfortunately, the sound is not going to come through. But the day we arrived in India was the festival of Dasara, and I just thought this was kind of interesting. They're beating drums and they're playing some instruments there, and the drum beating is just boom, 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 boom on the drums. If the sound would come through, you'd hear it. This is a big Ashok Leyland truck. I began to recognize the difference between the Tatas and the Ashok Leylands. Those are the 2 big trucks. These are some of their Hindu gods that they have up on the flatbed of the truck. And you can see that they do have some animation on some of those gods. This is a festival that they observe during the day, but then they turn out at night, really in droves, to celebrate this Dasara. And I'll talk in just a minute about more of what that is as soon as this video finishes. And you can see how tightly packed the traffic is there. Traffic is something else in India, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Dasara or Dasira, Vijaya Dashami or Dashain, however you want to, they spell it a bunch of different ways, call it different things. It's a Hindu festival that celebrates the victory of good over evil. It's a gazetted holiday in India, which is marked on the 10th day of the bright half of the month Ashvin, according to the Hindu calendar. And many people of the Hindu faith observe Dasara through special prayer meetings, through food offerings to the gods at home or in temples throughout India. They also hold outdoor fairs, or melas as they call them, and large parades with effigies of Ravana, who was a mythical king of ancient Sri Lanka. And the effigies are burnt on bonfires in the evening. Dasara is the culmination of the Navaratri festival. If you want to learn more than that about Dasara, look it up on the internet. I don't have time tonight to go into it. These are some of the leftover gods from the Dasara festival, and on the day after Dasara, they will take these gods out to ponds and places where they can drown them in the water. And I don't really understand this. You can, again, look it up if you want. But somehow drowning these gods gives them good luck throughout the remainder of the year. I don't, as I say, I saw some garlands floating in the ponds, and they told me that's where they had drowned some of these gods for Dasara. This is one of the many Hindu temples that we saw as we were driving along. Now these are stores And then, stuck in the middle of it is a Hindu temple. And it's just a little tower in there that you can go in there and you can worship and whatever. Reminds me kind of Acts chapter 17, verses 22 and 23, where Paul was traveling into Athens, and he began his, he saw all of these gods, and then they had all of these idols and altars to all kinds of gods in there, and they even had one to an unknown God. And Paul said, that's the one I want to talk to you about, the God that you don't know. This is a little temple to a god. You see these little concrete block structures? This is just a little, almost looked like a stone out in the field. They told me that was a little marker that somebody had put up to one of the Hindu gods. And they have thousands of Hindu gods. This is a little wall. And that's all it is. And it's got these little towers on it. And that, again, is a little marker to a Hindu god. You see these little rooms that they put in there. At first I thought that these were tombs for somebody, but they said no, that's two little temples to two little Hindu gods. And then on their door lintels, these people are Christians now, but they were recently converted from the Hindu religion into Christ. And so they still had the paintings on their door lintels in the house. And they have these little circles on the lintel of the door frame, and those little circles represent something that they will actually worship that door lintel, the Hindus do, before they enter through that doorway. Thinking back now, the Hindus will tell you, if you go online, they'll tell you that the Hindu religion predates the Bible by 10 or 15,000 years. Well, that's just not true. Look at 1 Samuel chapter 5 sometime, and look at when the Philistines had captured the Ark of the Covenant, and their god Baal was, or Dagon rather, I'm sorry, he was one of the Baals. Dagon was his specific name. And God caused him, they put the ark in there with Dagon, and God caused Dagon to fall. They set Dagon back up. And the next morning they came in, Dagon had fallen, and his hands broke off across the lintel of the doorway to the temple to Dagon. And so it says that the Philistines would not step on the lintel of the doorway anymore because of what had happened there when they brought the Ark of the Covenant into Dagon's temple. And so probably my guess is that this has something to do with that. And we can find in every false religion, you can just about always find the beginnings of its practices in something that happened in the Old Testament in the Bible. How many people can you fit into your car? When I was a kid in the 70s, it was a popular thing on the college campuses to take a Volkswagen Beetle and see how many people you could cram in it. I do not know what there actually was a number in the Guinness Book of World Records for who crammed the most people into a Volkswagen Beetle, and I think it was in the teens. Well, I am convinced that if you sent that same Volkswagen Beetle over to India, they would stick about 3 more people in it than that number and still be able to drive it. I actually saw 7 people, a family of 7, on a motorcycle. I mean, one of them, a little child sitting on the headlight, and another one sitting on the tail light of the motorcycle. They were coming out of a dirt road and onto the main highway to go into town. Saw one car that they had the doors actually tied with rope shut, and it was a car that we would see. It was like a Ford Escort or some tiny car like that was designed to seat about 5. There had to be at least 7 people inside, and there was one person standing with the doors open, standing on the sill of the door, hanging onto the luggage rack on each of the 4 doors. 2 people standing on the back bumper of the car, hanging onto the luggage rack, and they had tied them all on with rope so that they wouldn't fall off. And they were driving in Hyderabad like that. And this is just a common thing in their culture to do that. The rules of the road in India, you drive on the left, at least if you feel like it. Coming out of our hotel at Jadcherla, or actually it was just south of Jadcherla, at Mabubnagar, we had to go to the right to get back to Jadcherla. And instead of going to the left and then going to the first break on the superhighway, and this was a superhighway, this was their version of our interstate, instead of turning left and going to the break and making a U-turn and coming back, they would just turn to the right, go down the road the wrong way, beep, 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 and, you know, kind of on the shoulder until they got to the first break, and then they'd cross and head on their way. And this was a common thing. You'd be going up an entrance to the interstate, some guy on a motorcycle would be coming the wrong way right at you because he needed to get down and around, and this was the closest way to go. And you just give the signal, and people get out of your way. Now over here, if you beep at somebody, you're liable to get into a fight. Over there, if you don't beep at them, you're liable to get into a fight. They will actually run you down, cut you off, and say, hey, you didn't give the signal, what's wrong with you? So you give the signal, and if you're passing somebody, you're almost always expected just to cut them off. So they're used to that. Hang on tight, and you get there any way you can, and that's really about the basic rules of the road. Somebody said, sort of like organized chaos, and I said, no, just leave the organized off of it. It's just chaos. I don't think I ever want to try to drive in India. I got to where I could ride in a car and look out the side window and try not to pay attention to where we were going, and then I didn't have heart failure every 5 minutes. This is the second hotel that we stayed at in Mabubnagar, just south of Jadcherla. This is Dad, this is Dina Dayal, and this wall goes all the way around the three sides of that hotel. Where is the trash? If you look right in here, you'll see a pile and a pile, and it's just scattered all the way on the other side of the wall. And wherever you go in India, you're going to see the trash just scattered wherever they want to throw it, just outside their compound. In the cities, most of the cities now send a garbage truck through with a loudspeaker on it telling people to bring out their trash 2 days a week, because people literally would throw their trash over their walls into the street, and there it lays. Some of them would burn it there in the street. And so you just see this all over India. It's just the way their culture is. We did not have to resort to camelback to get anywhere. But this was in Hyderabad, downtown Hyderabad, that I saw these camels, and you would see livestock being sold on the street right downtown Hyderabad. At one point there was a festival, Muslim festival, where they were going to slaughter thousands of goats, and this was in celebration of Abraham taking Isaac up on Mount Moriah, and then God substituting the ram. And the Muslims have turned this into a holiday, and they will slaughter goats. Some of them take them to the Muslim temple, some of them slaughter them at their houses, and they eat them. And there were goats all over the city being sold to the Muslims for this great holiday so that they could slaughter their goats and worship their God. And by the way, Muslims do not worship Jehovah. They worship a different God whose name is Allah, and He's not Jehovah. No matter what you may hear from any Muslim or anyone who calls himself a Christian, he ain't the same thing. This is wash day in Nalgonda. This is Vandana, who is the wife of Brother Isaac, and she is washing the clothes. The first morning I was at the Elijah room, and I'll show you a picture of that in just a second, in Nalgonda, I heard this pow, pow. And I thought there was construction going on at one of the nearby houses, and somebody was taking a sledgehammer and beating down a concrete wall. That's what it sounded like. It wasn't. The next morning I heard this, and I walked out because I was dressed and I was doing some studying, and it was Vandana beating the clothes out on the concrete. And it sounded just like a sledgehammer. And every morning you would hear somebody beating out their laundry. And many of them did not use clotheslines. This lady, you can see the Type 1A construction ladder over here. Not hardly. It's probably made out of bamboo and pieced together out of 2 or 3 different ladders. I don't know. The wonder to me is not how there are so many, is just that there are so many people that are still alive in India with the way that they live and the types of ladders they use and the way they drive and all of that kind of thing. But they're used to this. But she washed her clothes and she laid them out on this dirty black roof. Brother Isaac said she probably swept the roof before she laid the clothes out on it. But she just laid them out on that dirty black roof, and it was just covered with clothes when she got finished. And she let them dry, and then she took them down, folded them up, put them away. I do not know how in the world her family had clean clothes after doing that, but apparently they did. Most of the food that I ate in India was fresh. And when we say fresh in America, we mean that a farmer raised it, sold it to a food co-op or a food broker, a produce broker, and then the produce broker sold it to public supermarket. It went to the warehouse in Lakeland and then got on a truck and was shipped over here to the local Publix. When they say fresh, they mean this was picked in the field, brought in by the farmer to town, sold on the street corner, and then they got it and it was still green, as it were. And they would lay it out in the street in the sun in the middle of the city to dry out. These were red chili peppers. And once they dried those chili peppers out, then there was a mill that was just down the street from the house. They would take it to and they would grind it up into the powder, and then they would put it into a jar and keep it until they needed it and use it as needed. But most of the food that I ate was very fresh that way, brought right in from the farm, sold directly to the homeowner, and then they would cook it and we'd eat it practically the same day it was picked. A little bit different idea. This is your local Publix in India. You saw these shops all over the place. And as I said, people would sleep on the street corners. If you notice, this is, I think, a little bench back here. And at night, the proprietor of this shop and his family would sleep in that shop. That's where they lived. And, that little tarp was their roof. And the little grass walls to the side were the walls for their house. And they would bring their produce in there, and that's where they lived while they sold the produce that they had. And you saw that on a regular basis over there. This is some of the construction. All of the buildings that I saw in India were constructed out of concrete. But they would use wood to form up the forms for the concrete. And now this house, it's a superstitious thing that they do not build a three-story house. So they're either going to put a little tiny room on top of this to make a fourth story, or they have the money to build a full fourth story on top of that. They either go 2 stories or they go 4 stories. They do not build a 3-story house. Didn't understand exactly why that was, but that's their superstition. They will brick these walls in and then plaster the bricks so that this looks like it was poured concrete when they get finished with it. These columns that they have mean that they can go up 4 stories. Whenever you see columns in one of their buildings and you see the wires sticking out of the top of the column, those are the rebar sticking up that will allow them, once that top concrete is set, to be able to put the pillars on up higher, put forms around, pour more pillars, and then go up 1 more story on top of that. I don't know. These poles are just kind of stuck up there, and I guess they beat them into place where they will stay. Don't ask me to work underneath that until that concrete is set. I'm not going to do it. This is another thing. But this is common construction technique. And I actually saw a 9-story building going up in one of the cities there, and they had taken bamboo poles like that, and they had built their scaffolding out of bamboo. And I mean, it went up like this, up that building, in kind of an S-curve. I don't know how in the world it was strong enough to support the weight of a person up 9 stories working. But there were men up there working along on that scaffolding. And they would climb up there. They didn't have any work elevators or anything. They climbed up. This is right across the street. The Elijah room was right over here in Nalgonda. This is the little street that we turned down. And when we turned down that street, I didn't think the car was going to fit. But Isaac got it down there, and he got it all the way in his gate. These are some children that live across the street in one of these houses. Now, these houses do not have bathrooms. Their bathroom was right on this side of this water tank. And they would just squat down and use the bathroom in that open sewer, and they would take a cup and dip it in that water tank, and they would clean themselves after they were through, and that's how they use the bathroom there. This man over here is actually cleaning the sewer out on this side of the street. So when you're in the cities there, if you're walking down the street, you do not want to step in the ditch. Because they do not have closed sewers. Now you'll notice that there are some closed areas here where they can go in their doorways, but that's the closest thing they have to it. Electrical production in India. This is the second largest, right over to this way. I didn't, for some reason, didn't put a picture of it here. Is the second largest hydroelectric dam in the world. This lake back here supplies the power for about half of the Indian population. I think they have 3 of these major dams and lakes that supply all of their electrical needs. They have no other electrical production. The water level in this lake should be right up here where this boat is, and it's all the way down there right now. So the power would go on, or would go off for 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon. And then they would have power to power their lights at night. But the rest of the time it was a rolling blackout all over India because the monsoons had pretty much failed the year before, and so their dams were in serious need of having more water in them. And they told me that probably in a couple of 3 months that they would be without power for a week at a time when the water completely ran out. And they would just have to roll the blackouts that much. But that's the way they live. This is one of the little convenience drug marts. You'll see over here Lay's potato chips. There was some kind of other chips here. And then you see all these little packages. These were drugs that, quite frankly, would probably be illegal in America. I couldn't recognize the names on them. They were tobacco products, but Dina Dial told me that people go in there every day and they'll buy 3 or 4 of those packets. And they'll take those drugs because they think they have to have them to give them the energy to be able to work. And so their population is very dependent on these, what in America would, I'm sure, be illegal drugs that are just sold at the little stores on the side of the street all the time. They do have some Western traditions. This was my birthday cake on November the 16th. It was a cake with white flour, just like one of our birthday cakes, had a sugar icing, like an American birthday cake, really. Decorated a little bit differently than I've ever had one decorated, but it was a beautiful thing and it tasted very good. And I also learned that there are about 8 or 9 verses to Happy Birthday, and they knew them all. I didn't ever know there was more than one, but they know about 8 or 9. And they sang them to me. This is a typical home in India. 1 room. Over here is the kitchen. This is Brother Prakash. This is his wife. Here's their storage place where they put some of their dishes and things like that. And their bed rolls and things, and they just roll the bed rolls out on the floor, and that's where they sleep. And they do everything in this 1 room of this house. Either that, or there's a courtyard off to, the doorway is right over in here, and there's a courtyard out in there. And if it's a night where it's particularly hot or something, they may choose to sleep out in the courtyard. There is a ceiling fan in here. Most of the homes did have a ceiling fan to try to ward off Domalu. Domalu is that invention of God after He threw man out of the garden to further curse him, called the mosquito. I'm convinced there's 1 verse in the Bible that's missing after spending a month in India, and that's the one where God created the mosquito. That's tongue-in-cheek. I'm not serious. But this is how most Indians live. It's a 1-room house. They're church buildings. This is an Islamic worship center that I saw on the side of the road. You see their spires and all of this. They always have the electronic loudspeakers there to call the worshipers to worship. And you'll hear them about 4 o'clock every day calling the worshipers to face Mecca and get out their prayer rugs and worship. And they transmit all over the city when they do it. I think that this was a Baptist church. that met here. This was near our hotel there in Jadcherla. This is the Jadcherla Church of Christ building, the inside of it. This building would be about half of this building and maybe about 2/3 of the pews. Just that part of this building would represent what about 150 people gather in and sit in to worship God on a regular basis. And this building, by the way, is too small for that congregation. When they have everybody there, they have about 200 people, and they have to meet outside because the building's just not big enough for them. This is the outside of the Jadcherla Church of Christ building. This is the Couture Church building, and I don't know why in the world I didn't get a better picture of the outside of this building. I should have. The building is right here. That was the first village that we visited, and I just wasn't thinking properly. And I thought, I need a picture of the church building, and so I got it here as we were going away. And I should have just said, wait, let me go back and take a better one, but I didn't. This is the inside of the church building at Couture, and this is a snake skin that they showed me. The building is brick and mortar, and the mortar is so rough. I hope you can see from this picture how rough that is. And the snakes will crawl up the side of the building, find a hole, and there's been many times they've come in to worship and found snakes inside their building that they've had to shoo out before they could get in there and worship. I think most of us would be a little unnerved at that. This is the Gonbada church building, and as you can see, there's no roof to their building. They met under this tarp out in front when we went there, and when it's raining they simply can't worship because during the monsoon season they seldom have worship services because they just don't have a place to go to get out of the rain. They need a roof on this building, and I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. They have built this building by themselves, by the way. This is worshiping at Gonbada, and they just put these mats out underneath that tarp. And I think this is Dina Dial's knee you're seeing there. That's my little case that holds my iPad. And then these people are, she's calling, she is singing into that microphone. And the reason that they do that, they have a loudspeaker there, and the people will hear the singing going on, and they'll come in from the fields to worship. And that's the way they call people into worship, is by just starting to sing into a loudspeaker. Another thing, the reason that Indians take their shoes off is because when you're walking along out there, it has nothing to do with religion. I thought it was the Hindu religion. It's not. But as you're walking along, you're walking through cow pies and everything else, and then you walk into the place of worship, and people are going to be sitting on that floor. You don't want to be bringing all of that stuff in there. So they take their shoes off before they go inside their house or go inside their church buildings for purely practical reasons. This is at Koyanator, and this is the house of Brother Prakash, which is the one-room house, and his house actually is through this door, and that was their one room that they lived in. This is Indrakala, and when they lived at Koyanator, Indrakala, I forgot to get it out. Many times when I was preaching, people would come up and ask me to pray for them, ask me to pronounce some kind of a blessing on them. And I had people asking me to pray that they would have a boy, something of this nature. If you look at Indrakala, you can't really see her up here. You can see her better on my computer. But her foot here, she is crippled. When she was baptized, when she was 18 years old, she was a normal young lady. And she got some kind of a disease that crippled her. And you can see just how thin she is here, I think. And her right foot here was kind of turned about 90 degrees at one point when I saw her. She had the sweetest smile on her face. She was the one who never asked me for anything. And she actually paid me 10 rupees for coming to preach to her. A rupee is 1.8 cents. So this is about 18 cents. This is more than I've ever been paid to preach the gospel in my life. She needed a wheelchair. The family had saved up about 4,000 rupees. to buy a wheelchair, and a denominational preacher came in and told them that if they would give him the 4,000 rupees, that he would raise the rest of the money in return with her wheelchair. And so they gave him the money, and he took off and was never seen again. I got her a wheelchair. I got her a nice one. And I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. After a week at Jadcherla, we went to Nalgonda. And Nalgonda means literally between the mountains. These are the two mountains. Nalgonda began right in here and spilled out from between those mountains long ago. This is the church building at Nalgonda. To the left, right up here, is the Elijah room that Brother Bill Beasley raised the money to build, and that was one of the nicest places I stayed while I was there. It was as clean as it could be, nice facility. This is the house that Brother Isaac and his family live in, and this is Brother Isaac, as a matter of fact. Now, there's a water tank right over on this side that's in the ground. They turn on the water there 2 times a week, 2 days a week. You need to fill up your tank when you've got city water, or you're going to go lugging it yourself, because they're going to conserve the water. They had a pump here which pumped it up to a barrel that was up on top of the house, and their water delivery system to the house was just the pressure of the water that was up in that barrel. And so they would fill the tank on the bottom, pump it all the way up into that barrel on top until it was overflowing, turn off the pump, and then they had their water until the next day when they would be allowed to use the city water again, and they would refill all those tanks again and keep using it that way. This is the house of one of the preachers, and for some reason I did not get his name. I did not get the name of the church that he preached for. This church building is right over here behind the house, and it has walls. It has a concrete roof, but the walls only come up about 4 feet in the air, and above that they're open. And that's all the money that they had to build on this church building. And as you can see, he's getting no support from anyone. He's working with his hands as a day laborer. And his house just has a thatch roof and virtually no walls. In summation, I visited 21 villages, taught about 75 preachers, about 53 baptisms were witnessed by me, got Indra Kala a wheelchair, and made hundreds of new friends over there. Together, we had 136 people that obeyed the gospel. Now, we did not baptize anyone. When we went over there, we told them, we are not going to baptize anyone, because we do not want people coming forward and being able to say in the future, oh, I was baptized by the American preacher. Just like in America, when a visiting preacher will come in to hold a meeting, and he lets the local preacher handle when somebody comes forward. That's the way we did it there. We let the local preacher there handle that because he knows his flock. We don't. But these 136 baptisms occurred during the time that we were there, and there were many more that were there that wanted to study the gospel further. And so I think there's going to be some more fruit that's going to be born even now that we're gone. There were about 150 preachers who were taught in 4 different Bible classes, actually. 3 of those classes lasted a week. 1 of the classes lasted 1 day. And we established 3 major bases for future work, and that's 1 in Nalgonda, 1 in Jadcherla, and 1 up in Shantanagar. Projects that I have, I do not know what the cost is going to be to meet Indra Kala's medical needs, but I promised her before I left that I was going to do everything I could to see if it was possible to find a cure for her disease, to find that cure. Money was left for her to see a specialist, and as soon as we know what the test costs are going to be to find out what the disease is, I will be talking about that, and then any medical needs that she has in the future. This is the wheelchair that I bought her, and I'm not popping a wheelie with her, but the back of the wheelchair actually folded down, and this thing you could actually sleep in it. I spent some extra money and I got her the Cadillac wheelchair because I thought that if she gets worse, they may need to strap her head in at some point in the future, and so it has a headrest on it that they can strap her head down and do things that may be needed in the future. And I was just showing this to her, and she just had the sweetest smile. Anyway. In Couture, mentioned this building and how the snakes can crawl through the mortar. They have a man there in the congregation that does mortar work himself. And they can do the work, but they need $300 just to get the material to plaster the inside and outside of the bricks. And I would like to see that we can raise that $300. Now let me say before we do that, and I know we're running over and I apologize, I do not believe that it's in their best interest for us to go over there like some of our brethren are doing right now and build them a church building and hand them the key to it when it's all done. Because what we're going to do if we do that is the same thing we did in the Philippines, the same thing that's done with welfare in the United States. We're going to build a sense of entitlement in them. And they're going to think that the American brethren need to do everything for us, and because we're so poor and they're so rich, they should give us everything. But these brethren at Couture built this building themselves, and they just need a little help to get it finished. This is a need that I think that would be legitimate to be met. It would be rather disconcerting to me to walk into this church building and find a cobra, sneaking around here, and it is to them too. Another thing is I would like to see if I can raise $6,000 to put a roof on this church in Gondbada. They have, as I say, built this building themselves. If they have a roof on this building, they can meet on the dirt floor until they can afford to put the floor in. They bought all of the bricks, and they put all of this together with their own hands. They basically need $6,000 for the material and a little bit of the equipment to help them to get the roof up. They can do a lot of the work themselves. And so this is not just giving them something, but this is helping them help themselves. And I think these are legitimate needs. Sister Victoria, who is Dina Dial's wife, has cancer. My first wife died of cancer, and so this kind of is a special thing to me. She is a college-educated lady who was a school teacher. She is extremely helpful to her husband. This is their son Sam, who by the way, is also preaching the gospel, following in his father's footsteps, and he is the next generation of translator in India. So some of you younger guys that go over to India may be working with Sam in the future, which is a good thing. But she needs, they're about $500 in arrears right now for cancer treatments, and they need about $1,500 just to complete her cancer treatments. There is no health care system over in India to help pay for this. They don't have health insurance, things like that. It comes out of their pocket, and they just don't have those kind of funds. But she needs to get rid of this disease so that she can go on living and helping Brother Dina Dial to do the work that he's doing. He travels to villages all over the place to preach the gospel, even while we're gone. The Jadchurla Church building, and this would be the last of the projects I have in mind, they're just too big. There is an empty lot. Brother Dina Dial's house is directly behind the church building, and there's an empty lot right over here. It is the only place that they could expand their facility into without either moving somewhere else or buying one of the houses that's already been built on either side or all around them. This is the building as it was 10 years ago, and you see it was wide open back then. But right now, there's just this one lot. The man told them that he would take $15,000 for it. They think they can talk him down to $14,000. They want to raise $2,000 of that. And so if they could be helped with $12,000, it would give them a place that they could expand into that would be good for them for about 30 more years, at least. Rather than see that lot sold to somebody else and then them have to spend a lot more money to pick the whole church up and move it somewhere else, this would be their best option. Well, what did we preach while we were over there? I'm going to finish up very quickly. In Hebrews 11, we talked about quite a bit that faith is essential to salvation. And we talked about the stories of faith in Hebrews. We went back to the Old Testament. We preached on them a little bit. In Romans 10:17, we're told that faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. James chapter 2 and verse 22, we're told that faith requires works, and that without works, your faith is dead. In Ephesians chapter 2 and verses 8 through 10 tells us that the works that God expects us to do are not the works of men, but they're the works that He foreordained that we should walk in them. The 10th verse of Ephesians 2. We're told in Acts chapter 2 and verse 38 to repent and to turn away from our sins and to walk righteously. In Romans chapter 10 verses 8 through 10, we're told that we should confess with the mouth Jesus is Lord to be saved from our sins. And in 1 Peter chapter 3 verses 20 and 21, I left the 3 out of there by the way, we are told that just like the waters of the flood saved Noah and his family from the sins of the world, so the waters of baptism save us today. And then we talked about Revelation chapter 2 and verse 10, how that we are to be faithful unto death, to receive the crown of life. Now, we didn't just hit these verses time and again, but this is of course the basis of everything that was preached while we were over there. We talked to them about authority and how that authority was established, and how the context is very important to that authority. And so I want to leave you tonight, I think all of you know these things that we've just talked about. I want to leave you tonight with these words that Gary Henry wrote in his word points. He said, "Our fondest hope should be set on the not yet part of the faith, more than on the already. Christianity is about receiving the crown of righteousness, so we ought not to dread the day of our death, or that of the Lord's coming, any more than a runner dreads to cross the finish line. To get to the finish is why we run." And then as Dinah Maria Mullock Craik said, "Life bears love's cross, death brings love's crown." Thank you very much for your attention tonight. If anyone here is subject to the gospel invitation, we invite you to come as we stand and sing.